All right, so if you clicked on this video, I know what you're thinking. You're trying to learn how to shoot manual, you're not sure how to do it, you're maybe a little scared to shoot it because you don't want to mess up your photos. I know that because it's exactly what I was thinking when I first started photography. But trust me when I tell you, it's so much easier than you think. I was terrified to shoot manual. I thought I was just gonna screw everything up. I was like, might as well just shoot an automatic. But trust me, I'm gonna show you today, it's really, really easy. Shooting manual is literally changing 3 settings. That's all you're doing, and you're gonna be able to shoot manual. So I'm gonna show you exactly how to shoot manual. I'm gonna just do a little explaining, and then I'm actually gonna go outside and show you examples on how to shoot landscapes, how to shoot wildlife, how to shoot portraits, and which settings you wanna change first and why. It's so much simpler than you think. So just stick around for a little bit, and by the end of this video, you're gonna be a master at shooting manual, trust me. And before we continue, one thing I just wanna preface is a lot of people think you have to shoot in manual mode all the time, or you're a bad photographer and you don't know what you're doing. Don't listen to this. This is not true at all. I still shoot automatic all the time. While yes, I think it's really important to know what each setting does and be able to shoot manual, but I still shoot automatic all the time because there's certain situations where I'm just walking around and I'm just taking photos. The automatic settings on cameras these days, the technology is really, really good. So shooting in automatic mode will still get you really good photos. So you don't have to shoot manual all the time. I shoot automatic a lot, and I'm gonna continue to do so. But that being said, it's definitely important to know how to shoot manual because there's certain times where you're gonna want your photo to look an exact way, and it's gonna be harder to get that in automatic mode. Your camera kind of doesn't understand what you're trying to think. If you want the background in focus or you want it blurry, your camera doesn't know that. It's just trying to make a nice photo with the conditions that's available. So when you're shooting in manual, you can tell your camera exactly the type of photo that you want, and you're gonna be able to get exactly that. So shooting manual is literally changing your ISO, your aperture, and your shutter speed. That's it. You're just finding the balance between these 3 settings that make your photo properly exposed and that achieve the look of the photo that you want. And that's all you're doing, is you're just taking these 3 settings and making a nice little combination of them to get the look you want. If you don't know what these settings are, before you watch this video, go click out. I suggest you watch this video. This is a video I made about what these settings actually do. So once you understand what they do, then you can kind of put them to work. This is a bit of a part 2. Now you're gonna be able to take those settings and actually apply them to your camera. If you don't know what aperture, so f-stop or ISO or shutter speed, if you don't know what any of this means, just watch this video quick and then come back, and then you'll be able to take photos with them. So with that out of the way, one trick that I really like to use when I'm taking a photo, before I change any of my settings, is just ask the question, what do you want your photo to look like? Or what is the priority for this photo? Do you want a large depth of field? So do you want everything in the photo in focus, or do you want just your subject in focus and the rest blurry? If it's someone running, do you want there to be motion blur on the runner, or do you want them to be tack sharp and the background could be a little bit blurry? When you ask yourself that, you're gonna be able to kind of adjust your settings to be able to match what the priority of the photo is. So the simplest way I like to look at it is aperture being depth, shutter speed being blur, and ISO being brightness. That's all these 3 settings are. And now you're just going to apply the effect that you want to the photo when you're shooting in manual. So like I said, I'm going to go outside in just a minute and I'll show you exactly what I want to do in each of these photos. And then after that, I'll give you a little bit of a cheat sheet on different types of photos and what your settings should roughly be. So depending on the type of photo you're taking, you can kind of use that as a bit of a reference point and you'll understand why. So depending on how you want your photo to look, you're just going to apply the setting to match the style that you want. Art is subjective. There's no right or wrong answer. But when you have a photo in your head, you're going to want to achieve that exact photo in camera, and that's what we're going to do today. So I'm going to show you how easy it is. Let's go outside and I'll show you exactly how I shoot manual for a few different types of photos. So I got my tripod set up here and I'm going to show you exactly kind of the step-by-step process of what I would go through to take a landscape photo like this, and in what order I would kind of decide my settings and I guess the process that goes behind them. Shooting manual is literally changing 3 settings. You'll see what I mean, super, super easy. So I'm going to kind of go step by step through my process in deciding what settings I'm going to want for this landscape. Another good tip when you're shooting during the day, you always just want to start with your ISO at 100. So I could crank it up if I wanted to, but I'd always rather have my ISO as low as possible. So I'll start it at 100, and if you would need to increase it after, you can, but you're better off starting with the other 2. So as I said, because this is a landscape, I want everything in focus. So I want the grass in front in focus. I want these buildings in focus. I want the buildings in focus. And I want the clouds in focus. So to do that, I'm gonna need to use a higher aperture number. So typically with landscapes, I'd go between f8 and f11, something in that general range, because that's gonna get it open wide enough that you can get everything in focus. So that's gonna be my first setting here. So you can tell right away, this is just the last settings I used for whatever photo I was taking. So right now, the camera is just completely white because I'm letting in way too much light. So as I said, first thing I'm gonna set is my aperture. So like I said, between f8 and f11, we'll go f10. So that's literally 1/3 of it done. Now you can see the foreground is perfectly exposed, but the back, you can't see the sky. So if I zoom in, you see the sky is just too overexposed. So when you're gonna edit this photo after, when you're gonna post it, it's just gonna be all white and the clouds are gonna be splotchy. You're not gonna get any details. So then next setting I'm gonna set is gonna be my shutter speed. Because I'm using a tripod, I don't really need to worry about camera shake. If I was doing this handheld, you wanna keep your shutter speed just fast enough that you're not gonna get motion blur, but that's not really a factor with the tripod. At about 1/125 is gonna be good. So the clouds in the background are still in focus, and the front is a little bit dark, but I can lift those shadows a little bit in post. And my ISO, I wanna keep, as always, as low as possible when I'm shooting during the day. So my ISO is at 100, so that's perfect. So there you go, that's my photo. And now you just gotta take your shot. And there you go. So now I'm gonna do the exact same exercise, but with a different example. So in this example, wildlife photography. Like in a landscape, the most important thing is kind of to get everything in focus. In wildlife photography, the most important thing is to have the animal or the subject tack sharp. So the first setting I'm gonna change is shutter speed. You're gonna want a fast shutter speed, so almost as fast as your camera can go. So 1/4000, 1/2000, 1/8000, depending on your camera. So you're gonna want that super fast. And then after that, you change your aperture a little bit and then adjust your ISO. That's it. So in this case, I want to turn my shutter speed as fast as I can. So I have it at 1/4000. But if you look at that right now, the camera is still really dark. So that's not going to work. How do I adjust that? I'm going to open my aperture all the way. So if I was to go this way, it makes it more dark. So on this lens, f4 is as wide open of an aperture you can have. So now the only thing that's left to adjust would be the ISO. Photo is still really dark at 100. Then I'll just bring my ISO up to, we'll say about 800. There you go. So I'm gonna have a shutter speed of 1/4000. My aperture is f4. That's the most light I can let in. And my ISO is gonna be 800. So now the hard part about this is gonna be to actually find a bird to take a photo of. I mean, there's birds everywhere, but catching them like in flight or in action is a different story, but I'll try. So now I'll throw the photo up on screen. So because I used a fast shutter speed, you can see the wings, the feathers of the bird are tack sharp. That's only gonna happen when I increase my shutter speed. So at the beginning of every photo that you're gonna take, you just have to ask yourself, what is your priority in that photo, and then adjust your settings accordingly. All right, so the next example we're gonna go through today is gonna be a very popular photo style that a lot of people do, is portraits. I don't have anyone here with me, I'm alone. So my tripod is gonna be my portrait. It's gonna be the same concept. Let's just pretend this is a person and I'm taking a portrait of them. All right, so on my camera right now are the settings I used for the wildlife shot. Now they're not bad, but you know, they could be more optimized for a better portrait. So when I'm taking my portrait, the question I want to ask is, what is the priority? So I'm going to want a high quality professional looking portrait. So I'm going to want my subject, pretend it's a person, in focus, and then I'm going to want the background nice and smooth and blurry to have that high quality professional portrait look. So again, you always start with your ISO at 0. What's going to be the priority is I want a depth of field that's nice and shallow. So my last lens, I can only go f4. Luckily on this lens, I can go a little lower. I'll go to about f2, f2.5 normally for my portraits. Sometimes if you get a little bit lower, it can create such a shallow depth of field that like the nose will be in focus, but the back of the ears and the hair won't be. So going a little bit higher, like f2.5 compared to f1.8, kind of gives that advantage. And now all I'm gonna do is lower my shutter speed. I'm shooting handheld right now because that's literally my tripod right there. I'm gonna just wanna make sure that my shutter speed is not too low, enough that I don't have camera shake. So in this shot, my priority is gonna be to make sure that the tripod is properly exposed. I don't need to worry as much about the clouds like I did in the landscape because they're not really gonna be in focus. They're gonna be nice and blurred out because of that low aperture. So this looks perfect. So I have f2.5, 1/640 as my shutter speed, and my ISO at 100. And now we just take the photo. I'll throw it up on screen here. Look how clear the depth of field is. That's exactly what I would want for this portrait. See, if I wanted to take this portrait with a higher aperture, so I can raise it to say f10 like we did with the landscape, but now the photo's darker, so I'll have to lower my shutter speed. But that's not enough. So you just have to increase your ISO a little bit to compensate. I can take this photo, but look at the difference here. It's still a nice photo, but now the background is also going to be in focus. So that could be a creative choice. If you want your background in focus, you can shoot a portrait at a higher aperture, f10, f12, whatever you want. It's a creative decision. It depends on how you want your photo to look. In this case, I wanted that nice creamy background because that kind of gives that professional look, but you don't have to. You could always put it a little bit higher, but you just have to adjust your other settings accordingly. But there you go, shooting manual is easy. So I just kind of wanted to go outside and give you an in-depth look live of how I would kind of make my decisions in which settings to change depending on the photo. But I'm gonna go back inside now and I'm gonna kind of give you a little cheat sheet of the different types of photos. These were just 3 examples that were very popular. A lot of people take landscape, wildlife, and portraits, but there's a bunch of different other types of photography you can take. So I'm gonna go back inside and give you a little cheat sheet on where to start and what should kind of be your priority in your settings, depending on the different types of photo you're taking. So I'll see you there. All right, so now that I went outside and I kind of showed you an in-field example, I'm just gonna give you a little bit of a kind of cheat sheet, a little rough idea of, depending on the type of photos that you wanna take, what your priority should be or what your settings should potentially start at. Again, you're gonna maybe have to play around with this, and this is also a creative choice if you want it to look different than what I'm suggesting here. Obviously, you're gonna have to change your settings, but this is a good starting point. So I'll go back over what we covered. With a landscape, your priority is gonna be your aperture. You're gonna want that between f8 and f11, give or take. You can go outside this a little bit, but that's your rough estimate. If you're handheld, you want your shutter speed fast enough that you're not gonna get motion blur, just test it out. So like stick to like 1/125 at the slowest, roughly something like that. ISO as low as possible. With wildlife, the priority here is going to be the shutter speed. So you want a fast shutter speed, 1/4000, 1/2000, depending on your camera, something in that range. Aperture is going to depend on if you want the background in focus or not. I like to keep my aperture lower, so f2.5, f4, f5, something like that. Again, ISO, whatever it needs to be to make the photo look nice and exposed. Portraits, depending on the style you want. In some portraits, I like to have the background nice and blurred out. So in that case, I'll have a low aperture. That's gonna be the first setting to change. f2, f2.5, something like that. But if I have a photo of a subject standing in front of a beautiful mountain, and I also want that mountain to be somewhat in focus or at least visible, I'll do something like f5.6 to f11 in that range. So then you still have your subject in focus as the main subject, but the background, the beautiful scenery is also gonna be visible. If you're doing sports photography, it's gonna be very similar to wildlife. You're gonna want a really fast shutter speed so that when your subjects are running or skating or biking, whatever they're doing, they're gonna be really in focus. So with sports photography, your shutter speed is gonna be the priority. Same thing with something like trying to catch raindrops falling. If you wanna catch those raindrops nice and tack sharp, set your shutter speed first to something very fast. This is another good example, is a group photo. If you're taking a portrait of 5 different people and they're kind of standing, a little bit, one's maybe just a little bit ahead of the other one. If your aperture is too low, something like f1.8, the first person might be perfectly in focus, but if the person standing next to them is just a little bit behind, their face might be out of focus. So if you're taking a group photo, I'd suggest starting your aperture around 5, something like that. At least that way you know all of those people are gonna be in focus, and still at f5, you can have the background out of focus and have a nice bokeh effect, but at least you know you're not gonna have some people in focus and some people out of focus. That's another good tip. Another one, if you're taking photos of the stars, so astrophotography, you're gonna wanna do a long exposure. So that means your shutter speed is gonna be really long. So instead of your shutter going really fast, you're gonna have it go wait 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and then the shutter closes, so you're gaining all that light. You're gonna wanna set your shutter speed first to something like 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, depending on your lens. You'll have to play around with it, depending on the focal length of your lens to not get star trails. I'm gonna make an entire video on that shortly of astrophotography, so stay tuned. It's still, because it's nighttime, you're gonna need more light, so you'll have to lower your aperture to as low as your lens can go, so f4, f1.8, depending on your lens, and then you'll increase your ISO to really make sure that the image is bright enough. If you're doing product photography, a lot of the time, if you're trying to take a really, really close-up photo of like a watch or a ring, you're gonna want a low aperture, so f1.8, f2, something to make sure that product is really the center of attention and the rest is nice and clean and professional looking. So these are just examples of different types of photos and the settings that you're gonna wanna prioritize first before adjusting your other 2. Again, I always start with my ISO at 100 and then only adjust that as needed, because the more you increase your ISO, you're gonna get more noise in. So if you can always keep your ISO at 100 and still achieve the look that you want, I'd suggest doing that, but sometimes it's not possible. You're gonna have to raise it a little bit, which is totally fine. It's always a good rule of thumb to try and keep it as low as possible and only raise it when you need to. And then just keep what I said earlier in mind. Aperture is gonna be the depth. So do you want the whole photo in focus or only one part of it? Shutter speed is going to be the blur. So do you want your photo tack sharp or do you want some motion blur? And then ISO is just at the end to adjust to make sure your photo is properly exposed. Again, just keep in mind the higher you raise your ISO, you'll make your photo brighter, but you'll start introducing noise. So keep that in mind. And that's it. All you're doing when you're shooting manual is adjusting those 3 settings, and there you go. Again, don't be afraid to shoot automatic. It's good to learn to shoot manual, but don't be afraid to shoot automatic. The technology is great. You'll still get great photos. So if you're not 100% comfortable, what I suggest you maybe do is take a few photos in manual mode to test it out. And then if you're not sure if you got it, just switch to automatic. Take 1 photo, so at least you have a backup in automatic if you're a little nervous when you're gonna go look at your photo later to see if it was, exposed properly or your settings were good. Just take a photo at automatic before you leave that spot, and there you go, you have a backup automatic until you're comfortable enough that you know you're gonna get the shot in manual. So hopefully you learned something from this video. If you're interested in other photography videos, please check out some of the other videos on my channel. If you wanna see my photography, you can go over to Instagram at The Sneaky Lens. I have all my content, all my photos there. Whenever you guys support me over there, it's really, really appreciated. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.